Welcome back, riders. Today is number 23 for 25 days of coasters. I might lose some credibility today, but I'll tell you what, I'm sticking to my guns and I'm just going to come out here with all honesty. Nearly everybody has this roller coaster, at least in their top three, and it's almost like the undisputed best roller coaster in the world. But for me, my 23rd favorite roller coaster is Steel Vengeance at Cedar Point. As always, we will start with the background and stats. Steel Vengeance is located at Cedar Point, which is one of the most famous amusement parks in the world. For those of you that are unfamiliar, Cedar Point is located in Sandusky, Ohio, which is about an hour west of Cleveland and situated on a peninsula on Lake Erie. Steel Vengeance opened in 2018 and was built by American manufacturer Rocky Mountain Construction. Rocky Mountain Construction specializes in converting older, less popular wooden coasters into world-class roller coasters by reusing like the existing structure and their iBox steel track. And that is how Steel Vengeance was born. Steel Vengeance uses the footprint and supports of Mean Streak, which was a massive wooden coaster that was actually one of the largest in the world. Mean Streak opened in 1991 but over time grew unpopular and closed in 2016, which eventually paved the way for Steel Vengeance. Steel Vengeance is also a beast on its own, standing 205 feet tall with a 200-foot drop at 90 degrees. The ride features a top speed of 74 miles per hour, has 4 inversions, and covers a whopping 5,740 feet of track. That's more than a mile long. I was fortunate enough to work at Cedar Point for the summers of 2021 and 2022, as well as the fall for 2022. I also visited a couple times this year in 2023, so considering all that, this is one of my most ridden coasters with 72 lifetime rides at the moment. Unlike the first two coasters at 25 Days of Coasters, Hulk and Wodan, Steel Vengeance is not themed well. But that's okay, and that's not really expected from a true amusement park like Cedar Point. I'm okay with no theming and it doesn't really hurt my ranking. The first few elements are great, fantastic even. The drop is awesome. The first hill is pretty good. And the second hill, which I have pictured here, is absolutely awesome. And I think that first inversion going into like that turn, that's probably my favorite inversion on the ride. That's a pretty good one. I love how the inversion leads directly into the turnaround perfectly. But unfortunately, I don't really care for that second inversion, that like stall that brings you to the ground. I wish it was just more like Iron Gwazi's death roll. But honestly, the double up into the mid course is actually one of my favorite parts of the ride. I think it gets like some of the best airtime, and it's overlooked in my opinion. I don't really hear people talking about it, but whenever I ride it and experience it, I'm like, wow, that was absolutely awesome. My experience with the mid-course over the last 3 years hasn't really gone well. I seriously think I've only gotten one trimless ride, which was just a couple weeks ago, back in September, October. In 2021, I feel like the mid-course just tapped the train more often or not, which is obviously good. But then in 2022, I just felt like the mid-course hit really hard for the vast majority of my rides. Aside from being extremely long, I don't think the second half has much of a bite if the mid-course hits, which, for me, like I stated, was kind of more often than not. Speaking of the second half, I don't want to come off the wrong way. Steel Vengeance is still my number 23 for a reason, which is still within the top 5% of all my coasters. And like I said, the second half is extremely long, which is great, but there are a couple of things I don't really care for. First are the two inversions. They are very typical for RMC and they're not really unique at this point. You can find them on pretty much all of them. Second, I tend to prefer airtime in longer periods, more sustained rather than the quick bursts. I don't mind the finale, like it's not uncomfortable or anything, but I do wish they did something else with the ending, maybe like two bigger hills or three maybe with more sustained forces or maybe a super slow inline twist like the Wallaby Holland Untamed. Or honestly, I'd prefer like the Trick Track Double Up or something along those lines. Third, this really goes for the whole ride, but especially in the second half. It's kind of light on positive G's. When I'm deciding what coasters are on the top of my list, I'm not going out of my way to look for coasters that want to rip my face off the whole time with positive G's. But Steel Vengeance doesn't really deliver in the positive G's, like, at all, at least in my opinion. Overall, I think the biggest reason I'm not in love with Steel Vengeance has to go with my expectations. Historically speaking, I tend to think less of rides that are highly regarded and think more highly of rides that are not well regarded. I wouldn't say this is always the case, but it tends to happen a little bit, and I think this is what happened with Steel Vengeance. It was touted as like the closest coaster we've ever seen to being a unanimous #1 coaster for enthusiasts. Everyone, almost everyone raves about it. And when I got my first ride in 2021, or at least the moments right before, I thought it was going to be at worst my #3 coaster, and it's just never really gotten close to that in my opinion. I also want to note that I have unpleasant experiences with Steel Vengeance. Most people dislike the lockers, which I can understand, but personally I don't mind them. What I do mind is their policy on my medical device that I have to wear, to like live, and I have to bring that through the metal detectors. I know it's above the ride operators, and most of the time they don't give me a hard time, but the policy they're supposed to enforce sucks, and it makes my experience unpleasant when a ride operator actually enforces it. I seriously try not to consider these experiences when determining the ranking of a ride, but I just wanted to note that I do kind of have a negative connotation with the ride, aside from how it actually rides. I would be lying if I said I was never thinking like, I wonder how it's gonna go this time. Who am I gonna get this time? Are they gonna, enforce it this time? What are they gonna ask me this time? Every time I get in line. Over time, I definitely rode Steel Vengeance less frequently, and I continue to do so, honestly. But that's also a testament to the other great rides in the park. I would ride Steel Vengeance more if it wasn't for the other fantastic coasters in the park, but just on a factual basis, I did want to state that. So that's all I've got for today's controversial take. I know I talked about this ride in a pretty negative light, but I do just want to reiterate that this is still in my top 5% of all the coasters I've ridden, number 23 out of 494. So as much as I was kind of nitpicking in this video, I still really do love this ride, and it does deliver a pretty good ride. I just don't think it lived up to the hype of, everyone being at their #1 or in their top three. It's just not there for me, but it's still a world class experience that you can't get anywhere else. And I do like this ride, so I just wanted to reiterate that. But I hope you can see where I'm coming from. I'm sure most of you disagree, but that's fine with me. And until I get more consistent trimless or at least super light mid course tap rides, it's not going to move up my rankings, but it didn't move down all that much from last year. So let me know how much you probably love Steel Vengeance in the comments. But aside from that, that's all for this review. So you could go ahead and push down, pull up, exit to the right. I hope you enjoyed the video and go have your greatest day yet. Choo choo bye.